Good evening. Welcome to my weekly Node-RED live stream, an hour or so of Node-RED core development, covering whatever happens to be the topic of the day, whatever we might want to be doing for this week. If you're watching on Twitch, do say hi. You all do. You all get very chatty, which is awesome. If you're watching the YouTube replay, do leave a comment, do like, subscribe, all that shenanigans. You know the usual score. So, what are we up to tonight? Well, this week we've got the Node-RED 2.2 release targeted for Thursday this week. Let me silence my phone as it keeps telling me I'm already doing what I'm doing. So we've got Node-RED 2.2 scheduled for Thursday. So we're not at a point today of doing huge amounts of breaking new ground and new features. Kind of want to just do a bit of a tidy up on stuff we were doing last week on the Zoom, remembering the Zoom selection. There was a bit more discussion in the pull request, which we'll get into. And so there's a bit more work we want to do on that feature, which we're going to just get knocked on the head tonight so we can get that merged tomorrow, get a couple other issues resolved in the next couple of days, and then get the full release published on Thursday. So with that, I'm going to switch over to this view, and there's the chat. So good evening, everyone. Grant Spy, Nathaniel, Steve, Noxy Boy, Old Boy Tables, Harry77, Sharon, Reblaw49. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to you all. So, let's just do a quick recap where we got to last week. So, in fact, after the live stream, I did get to the point of raising the pull request. This is getting the Node-RED editor to remember what level it's been zoomed to whenever you reload the editor. And we also did some fixes with the sidebar, making sure the sidebar properly remembered if it was open or closed and which tab you had selected. Now, in this pull request, there was some ongoing discussion. Tobias raised a very valid point that for some reason, well, no, not for some, for some users, they don't want the zoom level to be remembered, that they actually rely on being able to reload the page to reset things back. So, yeah. There's that. There was also Uncle Fed who'd raised one of the original issues around remembering the width of the sidebar. But if you recall in last week's live stream, I decided not to open that can of worms, just given architecturally how some of the sidebar code works. So depending how we get on, we may crack open that can, but equally we may not. I reserve the right not. So yeah, I'm going to try and do a little bit. Speedrun's the wrong. Not a speedrun, but also I'm going to just try and crack through what I think we're going to be doing. So what we need is to actually load up Node-RED. So I've got, I have the zoom level branch running back here. Let's go and fire up a Node-RED. And just to make sure this is still working, I zoom in, I refresh, and we're still zoomed in. A couple observations. If I'm scrolled down here looking at this particular node, and if I refresh, the view has changed. So it's remembered what tab I'm on, it's remembered my zoom level, but it hasn't remembered where in the workspace I am. So first thing I want to do is we're going to add to this feature, not only remember the zoom level, but also remember the scroll position on the tab. Which, yeah, no, that's everything we're going to do to begin with. So we're going to go to view.js because, as ever, that's where the guts of the editor code is. And what we want to do is go and find where do we handle scrolling. Now, I know we definitely do handle scrolling. This might not, I don't know how well this comes through on the stream. This little navigator panel, you can just make out, I mean, yes, our accessibility needs improving, but there is the square there that we do track when we scroll the workspace. So we've definitely got scroll event handlers in here somewhere. And we've got 88 hits for the word scroll. Let me zoom in a bit so that at least the code is a bit more legible. We probably want on scroll. No. Maybe work backwards. If we go to the view navigator, so this is the component that is this little box down in the corner. It sets up various event listeners, but what we're looking for is there must be something here that deals with there on scroll. Right. So there's our scroll handler. That's what deals with storing storing the scroll position. And you can see we're inside the toggle function, which is what toggles the visibility of this guy. So that's not very helpful for what we want. This is a scroll handler that's going to be coming and going depending if the navigator is shown or not. We need a scroll handler that's just always there. But we can pinch that bit of logic. And in fact, if we go find its on scroll, resize. Yeah, in fact, there's a bunch of useful logic here. We want, right, one thing at a time. Let's grab the event handler. We are going to just, what are we looking for? Oh, I've not copied. I want on scroll is what we want. So let's just double check if we got a scroll handler in here. No, so nowhere are we listening for the scroll event. Well, we will shortly. So here's the init function. In fact, its chart is, you can see it, the chart is the object that we want the scroll listener on, so we can do this. And then we are going to, we get its scroll position from this guy. And again, to save the lookup, we know we can just replace that with chart. Now, what we don't want to do is be writing to local storage all the time. So if we just go and look at our pull request and remind ourselves, here we go. Yeah, so in the zoom view function, we added this line to store. And in fact, we store it every time you zoom in and out, which is reasonable because you might do a quick burst of zooming, but it's not like it's a continual operation, whereas scrolling is. And we don't want to be, we want to put some, we don't want to be writing to local storage every scroll event that gets fired, because that would just kill it. So we're going to set on scroll. On scroll. You know, sometimes when you look at a word or say it too often, it loses all meaning. Suddenly, scroll just looks wrong. Anyway, so what we're going to do is, if on scroll timer, then we're going to clear it, and then we're going to say on scroll time equals in fact we don't want to be redefining this function every time, so we're going to say store scroll position as a function, and this is going to return. So Borgie, what we're working on tonight is building on what we did last week about storing the zoom position, the zoom value whenever you reload the editor. We're going to do the same around the scroll position in the workspace as step one tonight. So we're just setting up the logic, the scroll event handler. Yeah. Oh no, sorry, I'm defining the wrong store scroll position, and this is just going to do red.settings.set local, and what do we call it? Well, we called that zoom level, so scroll position will do for now, and then we will store json.stringify of that, because local storage only stores strings. So we will stringify an array with the left and top X and Y scroll position. Yeah. So in the event handler, if there's a timer, we'll clear the timer, and then we'll set the timer to call store scroll position. What should we say? 200 milliseconds. So what this will do is every scroll event happens, and will happen dozens of times a second if you're scrolling. Each time it comes in, if scroll time is defined, it'll clear it, and then it'll set a timeout to happen in 200 milliseconds to actually do the store. So, which means if I keep scrolling, it's going to keep clearing the timeout and keep deferring actually storing it another 200 milliseconds in the future. So effectively, it'll only do the set when I stop scrolling. So we'll just put a console.log storing position, and just okay. So if we reload JavaScript console, open, errors. Marked as not a function. Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah. That will get tidied up. Don't need to get worried by that. So if I start scrolling, I have completely forgotten how to write JavaScript code. It's that way around. Clear timeout is a global, and you pass it the on-scroll timer value. Okay, so ignore all those errors. So if I scroll, and I keep moving, then when I stop, it stores one position. And if I scroll, stop, it stores position. Now, what's interesting is what happens if I move this guy? Cool. that. So look, I'm moving, stop, and another store position got. Nice. So we've now got a nice sort of debounced function call that is calling red.settings.setLocal scroll position. What I want to check is if I change tab, you can see storing position 00 got logged. And crucially, when I came back to flow 5, we already have the logic that the editor remembers your scroll position between different tabs within a session. That does get wiped when you reload. But you can see, if I put this somewhere where you can see a node. So look, debug up on that side there. When I go back to flow 4, I'm back up in the top left corner. Again, if I bring this up, you can just make out top left corner. When I go back to flow 5, it has put us back where we were. So we already have logic in place for restoring that position between tab switches. But the key thing is, as I switch tabs, you can see storing position is getting called. Well, it's getting called if it changes. It's not getting called because we're not actually triggering a scroll event because we're not changing the value. But if I go to flow 5, it gets called. So it does mean we're only storing the scroll position of the tab you were on. It won't remember the scroll position of all your tabs, but we'll stick with that for the time being. We can always, if people want scroll position for every tab remembered, then that'll be simple enough to add. But again, I'm not trying to over-engineer this, which isn't my usual approach. Okay, so we're storing it. Now we need to restore it. How do we restore it? That's the question. First, let's just go and have a look at workspaces. I'm just trying to remember where we actually... That thing I just showed you that we remember the position as you switch tabs. I'm just trying to remember where the code for that actually is. Here. So view.js has a listener on the workspace change event, and it keeps a workspace scroll positions array. Yeah. Right, so this is the change event. Whenever you change tabs, you can see it. Whenever you change tabs, it stores the current position of the current tab in this object, keyed by the event.old is the ID of the workspace that's being deactivated or being changed away from. So we store the old. What do we do next? Then yeah, so it switches tabs and then it changes the scroll to be the cached value if we have a cached value. So restoring it, actually, it might make sense if we were to store this whole object rather than just the active tab. In some ways, that actually makes it much easier. So, Electro, what you're saying? Actually, you've written a debounce decorator in the scroll list. Do you want to move it out? Yes, it is a debounce type thing. Not sure what you mean by move it out in this context, but yeah, at the moment I'm just kind of bashing the code into place, and then we'll tidy up. So store scroll position. We want to store, let's go find, this is what this looks like. And so whenever we change the scroll position, we are going to store, we're going to update our workspace scroll positions object. And that has to be keyed on the active workspace ID, which I think is called active something. No, it's not. I think it's red.workspaces.active. Yeah, that gives the ID of the active workspace. So up here, we'll store against the red.workspaces.active, the current position, and yeah, we'll call it scroll positions. Why not? And we'll JSON.stringify that instead. So that's now going to be storing a lot more information. So if I reload and do a bit of scrolling, scrolly, switch tab, switch back. So if we do red.settings.get local, what did we call it? Scroll positions. You can see we've got keyed by the ID of the tab, the scroll position of said tabs. Now, the reason this works and should work nicely is to do the restore now. So we're in it, and we'll just put it here for now. Workspace scroll positions is initialized to an empty object. Well, what we can do here in our init function, which is nice and early before we've loaded any flows, where did I paste there? Typing scroll positions red.settings.get local scroll positions, and then we can say if scroll positions, then we're gonna JSON parse it. Oh, don't do that. Right, yeah. JSON.parse scroll positions. We're going to ignore errors on this one. Yeah, this is something it shouldn't fail, but we're going to tolerate it to fail. And frankly, if it failed, there's nothing the user would be able to do about it failing. It would be the behavior we have today. So if we've got a setting that provides some scroll positions, we will parse it and then initialize our workspace scroll positions object with those values. So what all that means, if I just reload, just double check, yeah, I'm going to have to sanity check that this error is this marked as not a function error each time to make sure we're not introducing a new thing. So in the 2.1.6 release we did last week, we updated the version of marked, the markdown library, which changed its API. I have that newer version installed in my workspace when I've switched to this branch, and I just haven't run npm install to downgrade it. So So good question from Electro. Why do you prefer using var instead of constant let? Largely just force of habit, from a long time of not using constant let, and just, yeah, force of habit. And particularly when I'm in, it's one of those, when I'm modifying existing code, I tend to follow the pattern of what's already there to some degree, but equally in places, yes, we'll go through and tidy up the vars for constant lets. Yeah, it was related. I mean, it's only relatively recent in the life of the project that we have finally given up on Internet Explorer. So, yeah. And yeah, well, yeah. Anyway. So we want to test, are we restoring positions? So here we are on flow 5, and we're going to scroll down away from the default. Here on flow 4, I'm going to move us as well. So we've got those debug nodes up there. This one, we're going to stay up in the corner. So let's go to flow 4 and refresh. And it has restored our position. And flow 5 has been switched back, and it's remembered where we were. I think cool. It's all working. That is all working. Awesome. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to run npm install, which is going to downgrade marked. And there we are. Just get rid of that error. What I need to do is merge the master branch back into the dev branch, but that's part of just one of the chores, and I won't bore you with dealing with all the merge conflicts because of changes to package.json files in the two different streams. So all being well, when I refresh now, yeah, no errors. Yeah, nothing but the usual things I expect to see. So we're now remembering both position and zoom level, which is neat. But that's, I have to admit, remembering scroll position was not what I intended to start with. It wasn't even something I was considering, but it seems a natural thing to have done. What we really want to do now is to make this optional. We want to make it so the user can opt in to having both the position and the zoom level remembered between reloads of the editor. So to do that, we're going to add a new setting in the settings dialog, view, and put it in here. Where should we? There's the grid stuff about nodes, other. It's kind of, yeah. It's very reductive, but I feel the need to have a view section with remember zoom level and remember scroll. What we actually label them as is yet another question. Okay, let's just think for a moment, where is all this stored? So if we go to user settings, I seem to remember somewhere we have this. So this view pane is defined by this structure. What we're going to do is add in a new section by copying an old section. We want this to be view. Now, are we going to be so lucky? oops. Let's go check the message catalog. And where are we? Menu, label, view. Oh. I want editor.json, but I want the English version, not the Korean version. There it is. So menu, label, view. Yes, menu, label, view, view. So we already have this in the catalog. Awesome. One less thing to get translated. Then we're going to have view, remember zoom. We don't need an old setting for it, and I'm not going to bore you with why we have a property called old setting. Then what we're going to have is its label. Ooh, sorry, I've scrolled, which isn't helpful when the view jumps. So we have a setting. We're going to call it, we're not going to call it remember zoom. We're going to have, what are we going to call it? Store zoom? Okay, the label is going to be view dot, stick it in here, call it store zoom. Keep wanting to type the word remember, but it doesn't really. Maybe restore zoom level. Have to reload. Yeah. Okay, we can bike shed that a bit. And then store position, store tab, scroll position. Does that make sense? I mean, view position, restore, yeah. On load, have to reload. Restore zoom level on load. Restore zoom level. Okay, I'm going to stick with what I've got there, but please do in the chat keep hurling suggestions. Well, hurl anything you'd like. Anyway, store zoom. We are going to set the default to false. We're not going to change the behavior by default. It is a do I want toggle? I think I want toggle. Set to true. And on change. Don't need to change anything. I think we just. Yeah, I think that's okay. And then we're going to say store position, store position. Again, default false, toggle is true. I think that's all sound. Now I do need to just, again, I lose track of where I've got to with all these little things. I think if I edit the message catalog and add new stuff, I do have to do a full restart of Grunt. It's one of the things the reloader doesn't reload properly. So I think I might be wrong. Right. So if we bring up our settings. Okay. So we've now got these guys. If I bring up a terminal and let's see, can I, ooh, yeah, I'm doing a lot with JQ and playing around with, there we are, that's what I want. Oh, that's what I wanted. We're gonna What am I looking for? I am looking for .view. No. .view. No. Why opt-in versus opt-out? Good question. Yeah, that's a point of discussion. It's one of those. There we are. So if I do a watch. No, that's not how we do it. That's not how we do it. Oh, man, watch. Is that going to do it? Yes, that's going to do it. So, right, all that faffing every 2 seconds. This is my runtime settings. Let's not obscure it. So if I now set those both on and hit close, and we come back to this file, you can see store position and store zoom have appeared as true. If I now come in settings, disable view position and not zoom, you can see in my settings file that's been saved. Next way, restore zoom, restore workspace view on page load. Looking at notes, refer to the flow window quite often as the workspace, so probably best to use the same language. That's the sort of insight I like. So restore workspace zoom level. Maybe. It's getting very wordy. Does the word work? Does that? Oops, not managed part. And is there any value in having them separated out? What if? What if it's just one setting? Restore view position / zoom on load. Is there any benefit to the user splitting those two out? So, sorry, Hallie, why opt in instead of opt out? It's one of those, we do have to weigh up a change in behavior that could be unexpected. And if a user suddenly relies on reloading the page to get them back to a known position in a known zoom level, then it would be unexpected. Okay, so at the moment we've got Noxy Boy saying you'd use zoom but not position, so you'd keep them separate. Sharon says you'd vote for 1, so we currently have a tie. Bob Table says you can see a case for both. It's not much extra code to keep them separate. Yeah. There's virtually no extra code. It's to a degree though. The easy option is often just to say, "Oh, just throw another setting." Every setting is, is a choice the user has to now make, even if it's to ignore. So, want to be careful. As you can see, there are not a lot of options in here. I'm sure, were we to sit around a whiteboard, you don't sit around a whiteboard, you know what I mean. I'm sure we could come up with a long list of little toggles that could be here, but we choose not to do that. Okay, let's just tidy up this wording then. So, assume we're keeping them separate. Restore workspace zoom level on low. I think we can just stick, given we're in the context of the view and the grid, I don't think we need to throw the word workspace in here. I think in context if anything, we could change that word to workspace, but then grid is part of yeah. I think we're okay without the word workspace, but it was nice to try it. Restore zoom level. Yeah, we could scrap this grid section, as in not have it as a separate. Yeah. To be honest, nice boy, if you got your red pen out and started pointing out inconsistencies, you could be here for a while. Just don't start on what is a flow question, because yeah. Yeah, maybe keep that as view, because this is all about, well, sort of about the view. We could change that view to workspace, scrap the grid title, and just have these all as, I mean, it's just there is a nice little cluster of things to do with the grid there. Yeah, I don't want to, yeah, we could spend ages going around in circles on this. Restore zoom level and load, restore view position, restore position on. Well, we already restored the right tab. Well, based on the this bit. Well, Noxy Boy, I would love someone to spend some time reviewing the docs and providing some feedback. I mean, if you think there are lots of inconsistencies in there, then yeah, by all means, flag up a sample of the sorts of things you're looking at, because there may be reasons for the way it is, but maybe not. And yeah, certainly one of my chores for later this week for the release will be to adding in docs of the various wiring tricks that we're adding in this release. Anyway, how many more minutes can we stare at these 4 words, and not come up to an answer? Restore scroll position on load. Right, I'm going with those 2 just for the sake of we've got some more code to write. Otherwise, we could spend the next 20 minutes finessing these words, and that doesn't, well, it's important, but okay. So now we've done all that. Let's go and honor it. So we started, and again, I think Litro is quite right. There's a bit of tidy up. I mean, yes, I've got debounce here, and there are other things that debounce elsewhere. I haven't made a utility debounce function just because, well, it's one of those, how much is to be gained by doing that? Probably some. But often these things you sort of do it one place here, one place over there, and you don't really realise you're knee deep in debounce functions, and actually pulling it out into a utility would actually save some code. So, but we've got the storing going on. So we have actually got to think about, what have we got to think about? We've got to make sure we clear out old state just as much as we do restore it. So let's just deal with not restoring. So this whole scroll position stuff we've done here, that only matters if, let's red.settings.get editor dot view dot, what did I call it? In fact, I might be looking at the wrong thing here, but view store position. So that's currently false. Let's just check. So I've got them both ticked. I hit close. And yeah, okay. That's now toggled to true. So this is default if undefined. That's perfect. So if red.settings.get is true, and that will be undefined if it's never been set, then if it's true, we'll restore we'll do this restore logic. Then somewhere in here we've got the work we did last week around restoring the zoom level here. So store zoom, I think that's what we called it, view store zoom. View store zoom. So only if that's been set to true do we do the work to get local the zoom level and initialize the scale factor. Okay, now what I'm going to do, having put all this code I've just added, I'm going to yank it out from up here, and I'm going to stick it down here at the end of init. So we set up the zoom and then we set up the position handling. Right. Let's kill that. That's reloaded. Let's reload this. So it has restored my position. Reload. Yep, restored that. So now if I go into settings, turn off restore zoom level, reload. Well, it's restored my position, but because my zoom level has not been restored, then that's a pain. But no, Alexa, stop. Thank you. But if we go toggle them around, restore the zoom level and not restore the zoom position, sorry, the scroll position, then my zoom's remembered, but my scroll hasn't. You know what, Bobby Tables, you're right. There is a case for... So don't remember my zoom level, but do remember my view position. Obviously, if my scale factor is 1, if I'm not zoomed at all, that's just going to work fine. But if I am zoomed in, and I reload, it's not going to work fine because my scale factor's off. But is that just a slightly unusual combination? Remember where I was, but don't remember how much I was zoomed in. But Charles, I think there's a genuine scenario for wanting to remember the zoom. You know what, I think we might just live with that. I think it is slightly unusual, but again, there's definitely a scenario where you want to remember the zoom level but not the view position, because for legibility you prefer it zoomed in, but you do want it reset back to the top corner whenever you reload. That's a user scenario I can get behind. Remembering your position but not the zoom, and you have zoomed in when you reload. It feels a bit artificial, a problem to try and engineer a solution for. I think I can live with that. Okay. So on that basis, and the fact it's 10 to 9, and we do want to get this release out this week, I think that is going to address the counter argument for the pull request I did last week, which is there are users who don't want this feature. So we can now we'll be able to turn off this feature. Or at least this feature is there to be turned on if you want it turned on. So, okay, let me look again. So Bobby Tables and Steve, disable the position option if the zoom is unticked. So you're saying only allow it to store the position if it's also storing the zoom. I'm just, yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to weigh up, is it worth the code to add that, to enforce that, versus the slightly, is it worth the time and effort to deal with that edge case? I think I'm kind of inclined to stick with what we've got. And like I said, it's much cancel.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
It's much easier to iterate on this stuff than well, it's just easy to iterate on this stuff. Yeah, and it doesn't leave you stuck. Yeah. Okay, let's do the do. So we have added a couple new messages to the catalogue, and I will ping our friends at Hitachi to get the Japanese translations done tomorrow. We've added, excuse me, a new menu section with those two menu options. I'm going to leave the grid stuff where it is. Not going to collapse those down. And then in Vue.js, we have put a guard around the restoring it. So that's a valid point, that even if you haven't got those options set, okay, no, we've got to do 2 more minutes. So we were still storing the values, even if you had the checkbox ticked to say don't store. Well, the checkbox says restore the value. We are storing it, regardless of whether you want it restored or not. So, well, that's another point. Bobby Tables, do we need to add notes saying these settings for this session only? Probably. I just can't quite picture the words, if that makes sense. Right, what we're going to do here is we're only going to store, only store it if, dun, dun, dun. So we're only going to store this stuff if those options are ticked. So there's going to be a little quirk if you enable the feature. Yeah, because we never clear it. So we've got some scroll positions. If I disable that option, we've still got the old value stored. I think as soon as I scroll a bit, yeah, see it's updated the existing object. It kind of feels like we need to do something on change. So if you change the value, it feels we ought to be flushing it. So we can add an on-change handler to, which one's the first one? Restore zoom. And I'm just going to console.log. I think I pass in its value. So here you can see it's been set to false, because it's off, and then toggle it and then hit close. It logs true. If I just close, yeah, it logs true. So in fact, the on change gets called whenever whenever it's loaded. So what we want to do is, if it's set to false, red dot. Ooh, interesting. Let's go look at the settings API we have for local storage. Remove local. There we are. That's red.settings.remove local zoom level. Yeah. So whenever this value gets set to false, we'll wipe whatever is in local storage. So we will forget. So it's not going to get into odd. If you toggle it a few times and then there's stale stuff in there, and then you reload and then the page inexplicably jumps. Yeah. Scroll positions. Okay. So we can see that in action. If I settings, restore scroll position on load. There we are. So just shuffled around a bit. Get local. So we have something in local storage. If I come down to settings and say don't restore scroll position on load, I reload. You can see I'm in the top left corner, which is where it should be. And if I get local scroll positions, it's now null because the clear out has been triggered. Let's make sure that clear out doesn't then break it. If I re-enable the feature, come down here somewhere and reload. Yeah, they're still there. And scroll positions has data. Come in here, settings, I turn off scroll position. I get it again, and now it's null. So we tidy up ourselves. That's a good thing. Okay. So that's better. So now the only question is the wording. Okay. Restore zoom level on load, restore scroll position on load. The problem with saying only applies to current session is, okay, what does session mean? The key point is all of these tick boxes we've got, as I've shown, get stored in your runtime settings. So if you log in a different browser, those will get restored. The zoom level and scroll position currently doesn't. They get stored in local storage, which means it's only in this browser. If I open it up in another browser and log in, those things won't get restored. Now, obviously, one option is to be storing these values in your runtime settings and not in local storage. That is a perfectly valid thing, perfectly valid change. You basically, it's relatively innocuous change, he says. So rather than set local, we call one of these, get. And then Steve makes the very valiant point that if you're logged in from two machines with different resolutions, then you want the zoom level to be remembered on that browser. So yeah, you made that very valid point last time. So it's one of those, it sounds innocuous little feature. Yeah, just remember the zoom level. But I think it's a great example of the sorts of, okay, now let's just list through all of the edge cases. And should there be another option? I think we're going to stick with what we've got. We're going to stick with the wording as we have it. We're going to stick with the implementation as we've got it. And we can iterate. We can iterate if we need to iterate. Because, nothing is finished. All right. So we've got store, scroll, position in local storage, and add override options to zoom, scroll. Not the best commit message, but try again. Add option to remember. This is better. Zoom and scroll position in local storage. Okay, we'll push that up. So now the pull request will refresh directly, and that's good to merge. All right, so we've got, in terms of 2.2, if I just look at the milestone, there's still quite a few things around here. I mean, quite a few of these are pull requests, which actually we just need to work through and check, sanity check, make sure we're happy with. There was this pull request, which we've not looked at yet, which I'm not going to put into 2.2. There's too many things going on. It's one of those I would have rather have got it into a beta and get feedback on. I mean, one is having arrowheads, and this is not actually part of this pull request, which is one of the reasons it's still in draft, is this would be an option. So just as we've added stuff in here, there will be another option in here to show arrowheads on the wires. But what this one also adds, which is more controversial and why I'm not sure I'm ready for it to go into 2.2, is changing the appearance of ports more generally. So rather than having the ports like this, where the ports are on top of the node, changing so the ports are behind the node, but more crucially, any port that has a wire connected to it, then it has the solid fill rather than the normal light grey fill. So it's easier to instantly see ports that are connected. If you had a node lying on top of a wire, if I connect those two, there's nothing visually telling you this function node is not on that wire. But it's not part of that flow. You can't tell the difference between that and that. It is pixel identical. Ooh. Oh, yeah, except when it's that. So, yeah, there's something to be said, and it's been looked at a couple of times. I'm not sure where I'm at with this in terms of it's not a minor tweak to the appearance of a node-RED flow. It is quite a substantial difference. I did experiment. I think you can make out here some different types of decorations for differentiating ports that are connected and not connected, but yeah, nothing quite landed. So anyway, that's a lot of time talking about something that isn't going to be in 2.2, but we've got a bunch of stuff and a bunch of pull requests just to squeeze in. So yeah, but yes, those arrowheads won't be in 2.2, and the changes to the ports won't be in 2.2 as it stands. Who knows? Yeah, and I will reiterate these arrowheads. However, whatever tweaks may happen to their appearance, it would be an option you turn on. They would not be on by default. Anyway, there we go. So yeah, on the face of it, that's still quite a lot to wade through, but most of these are pull requests. So most of these are just, quote unquote, just waiting for a review and sanity check. And actually, if we ignore, in fact, if I'm saying it's not going to be in, then let's remove it. So of these 10 open, most are pull requests. The one issue, in fact, has a linked pull request. Oh, clearing context. Yes, so this is the one we covered in the Twitch stream quite a few ago. So that's ready to go in as an option. So it's mostly just working through these pull requests now and just making sure they look good. This is a nice one for the subflow port nodes, which normally look like that. That if you've added port labels, actually display the port label text on the node as well, which looks really cool. Just needs a quick review to sanity check their code, but that looks good. And there's this one to do with our autocomplete, which adds a bunch of stuff, which this one may or may not make it in. This one feels like it needs a bit more of a review, and it adds a bunch of opinionated functions. So it's not very much code actually, but anyway. 2.2 coming on Thursday. Stay tuned. We'll be back next Monday with 2.2 released. We will, aside from bug fixes and sort of maintenance work, focus turns to 3.0 in April. So there's some bigger feature development we want to start thinking about and start socializing with the community around scoping out potentially bigger pieces of work that we want to get done for the April release, and for a major version change, so 3.0. So yeah, looking forward to that. But I think with that, we're pretty much done tonight. So thank you as ever for everyone joining. I hope it's useful. It's always good to have you guys chipping in as I go, spotting my mistakes, asking those questions. And yeah, be back here same time, same place next week. So have a good evening all, and I'll see you anon. Bye.